Public comments. Nobody has approached either the clerk or myself relative to making public comments. Does anybody wish to make a public comment outside of the presentations? Any public comments? If not, we will move on to the approval of the minutes from the May 12th and 24th meetings. What are your wishes?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move to approve.
It's been moved by Gibbs, seconded by Leahy. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries. Next item is operational functions, discussion and possible action. Approval of the May claims and question costs. That was distributed to you by Christie last week. If you had a chance to review it, what are your wishes? Moved by Supervisor Leahy to approve. Is there a second? Seconded by Hart. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries. Next item is interdepartmental or intergovernmental budget transfers. Christy, many of those deal with the ARDC, CW, and then there are others relative to other departments, but go ahead.
All the ones that have alphabet letters are the ADRC. And again, the ADRC is a separate governmental entity whose budget transfers are approved by their board. But because we are their fiscal agent, we make sure that we send them to our committee of record, which is the this committee, so that when we enter them in the system and the auditors see that our committee reviewed them and that they were approved. I did accidentally put in several that were actually a carry forward from 2021, none of the ADRC ones, which I accidentally had them in the June 21st folder, and I re-put them in the June 22nd folder, or June 2022 folder. Otherwise, you've got all of the ones that are budget transfers for 2022. Many of them are carryovers, so the ADRC, again, were already approved by their committee. But we also have many that are carry forwards. And the two that I wanted to highlight were I'm just going through them here just a second. The transfer from fund balance, you'll see on many of them. The one that was an error that I sent was the $10,576. That was actually a transfer from fund balance from last year that I had recopied into the folder for this year. That had already been approved last year. But most of them, again, are just closing out the end of the year to redo them. The reason why those do not need to go to county board is it's only for monies that are new monies. Those were approved in 2021's budget. With our current system, it only has fiscal year of 2021. So in order to keep doing a program into 2022, we just do a carry forward. So those are, most of them are.
And most of those are grants? Many of them,
CIP programs, CIP programs, so that's that long-term projects, and the rest are either grants or in the case of several other programs, such as a jail vending machine or commissary. It's a small program within the jail.
So you're withdrawing the one for the one. What are your wishes? Are there any questions?
So it would be any transfer for 2022.
What are your questions relative to the intergovernmental budget transfers for 2022? Is there a motion? Chair Gibbs?
I'll make a motion to approve the interdepartmental transfers, excluding the one that was pulled.
Is there a second? Seconded by Lemmer. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of the 2022 intergovernmental budget transfers will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
Aye.
That Motion carries. All right, Supervisor Limmer is on. Or Marshall. Marshall, yeah. Okay. All right. Without objection, I'd like to change the order for the educational presentations and take up item D first as it relates to the American Rescue Plan Act funding. Does anybody object to dealing with those items first, and then we'll come back and grab the others and let the people go on there and do their business? If not, we'll go on to that. And maybe just to set the stage for this, we have, as you know, the county has received or will receive $26.3 million in American Rescue Plan dollars that have to be committed by December 31st of 2024 and expended by December 31st of 2026. We have set up a process by which we will evaluate them, and we need to follow the federal guidelines established in the Department of Treasury guidelines, and they have to be in areas of, or eligible areas. Some of the criteria that we said that we wanted these to be one-time expenditures and not have, commit the county to additional funding beyond the scope of the ARPA program. And today we will hear the first approximately half of the proposals that we currently have before us. At our next meeting, we will have the other half, and then we will look at our path forward, whether we take action at that meeting or at the early July meeting. We'll determine based upon the other agenda items at that time, but we're hopeful to take this to the county board in July for their review and concurrence. So with that, we'll call first on the Village of Marathon City for their presentation. And is it better for the, these are being videoed or recorded and streaming live on YouTube. So perhaps if you want to come up front. Thank you.
We just have one member, I think, that's virtual that isn't able to do the copy. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is David Ballinger. I'm the village president in Marathon City, and with me today, I have the administrator, Andrew Kurtz. The Village of Marathon City would like to thank the committee for the opportunity to share details for the ARPA project request submitted by the village. We believe there's an opportunity for a unique economic development partnership between the county and the village created by the state and local fiscal recovery funds awarded to Marathon County. Marathon City is an employment center for the region with nearly 2,000 people coming to work in the village on a daily basis. The investments made in the Marathon City Business Park since 2004 has resulted in 35 new or expanding businesses and has created 225 new jobs. Several of these businesses offer goods and services to the residents in the region, while others produce products that are exported across the region, the state, the county, and the world. The Marathon City Business Park has been successful and has now reached its capacity. The village has designed an infrastructure plan to continue economic development north of State Highway 29. The North Marathon City Business Park build-out includes construction of a second water main crossing the Big Red River, construction of 1.6 miles of service roads north of State Highway 29 between 107 and 152nd Avenue, providing full access to 50-plus acres of land into number 1, along with the construction of a water and sanitary sewer infrastructure to support industrial, commercial, and residential growth within Business Park in its half-mile perimeter north of Highway 29. The estimated cost of this project is $4.9 million.
Working with our state legislative delegation, 2021 Act 94 was signed into law in December of 2021. Act 94 enabled the Village of Marathon City to secure $4 million in tax increment revenue bonding for the project. Marathon City has submitted an ARPA project request to Marathon County for $1 million economic development investment to support the Marathon City Business Park north of Highway 29. The village has also submitted a funding request to the Wisconsin Department of Transportation under the bipartisan infrastructure legislation STP local program. Marathon City will also be pursuing Community Development Block Grant, PFED, funds through the state of Wisconsin. The investment by Marathon County and the resulting economic development partnership will produce positive results. The village estimates that completion of the expansion north of Highway 29 would result in $40 million in private investment in our community, add a projected $9.5 million of new increment value to TID number 1, pay off all the TID number 1 debt within the extension period allowed, and result in 50-plus jobs locating in the community. Included in the projected TID 1 increment is a 40-unit workforce housing project, increasing housing available in the village. The village is also working with other entities to add a projected $22.5 million of non-TID value through additional development north of Highway 29 within the village's current corporate boundaries. Ultimately, the investment and partnership with Marathon County and Marathon City aligns perfectly with the application criteria defined by the committee. Economic benefit to the taxpayers and the county is realized through increased private investment, expanded payrolls, increased commerce, and increased tax base. Economic development aligns with the strategic and comprehensive plans of Marathon County as identified in our application. An investment by Marathon County in the Marathon City North Business Park is a deeper partnership than currently exists and sets a foundation for future partnerships. The Marathon City Business Park expansion will provide benefits to the citizens of Marathon County through expanded employment opportunity, new workforce housing options, and expanded access to products and services. We greatly appreciate the opportunity to address the committee and look forward to answering your questions at this time.
Are there any questions? So you have bonding, you have the $4 million of bonding.
Correct.
And where does our million, with the $1 million from ARPA fit into that?
So the total estimated cost of the project right now is $4.9 million. As you guys are probably aware with bids that you've done, there are inflationary considerations to that project. So what we're anticipating is that $1 million of ARPA funding would be allocated directly to the utility projects, which would be the secondary river crossing that David mentioned, as well as the creation of a new interceptor sanitary line, and then build out of the water and sewer infrastructure north of Highway 29, including a second Highway 29 crossing of our utility infrastructure. So the $1 million from the ARPA project would be allocated to that. Our bonding would be covering the roads and other infrastructure elements, power, telecommunications, and whatever other public utility pieces that were not covered.
Supervisor Baker.
If the board decided not to approve this, is there a plan B, or would that kill the project? And then I have a second question.
It would not kill the project. That's why the other funding sources that we are looking at play into that. So this is an element that's additive to our project.
Thank you. And then the second question is, do you have an estimate of what percentage of the benefits would accrue to the county as a whole, and what percentage would accrue to Marathon City?
Ultimately, the benefits of the development would accrue to both the village and to the county. So a portion of the area that we're doing development in is in TID number 1. That would be a delayed benefit to the county, which TIDs do. But there'd be about $22.5 million of value outside of the TID that would be added as a result of this. That would be an immediate accrual to the county, both in property tax and sales tax.
Thank you.
Other questions?
I have a question. This is Gail.
Go ahead, Gail.
The extension of the TID district was for how many years, and at what point is the TID expected to close with those benefits coming back to the county?
So the TID extension was for 7 years. So the initial closure was in 2028. So we got an extension to 2035. And then the other element of Act 94 reopened our expenditure period, which enabled us to do the bonding that we did. The expectation and projections that we have right now is that at the latest, the TID would close in 2035. But right now, based on what we're looking at with development opportunities and valuation, it's very possible that the TID could close as early as 2031.
Chair Gibbs.
Thank you. Andy, the question becomes, so if your projections show it closing, potentially closing at 2031, we could go back to 2002 when the original TID was created, and it was projected to close at 2028, with all of the funding going back to the individuals, entities that is being intercepted on the increment. And so now you extended that for another 7 years. What's to say that you don't leave it open all the way till 2035 when your projections were back when you first started the TID, that it was going to close at 2028 originally?
So the TID was initiated in 2004 and was projected out to 2028. So to answer your question, the main driver for us to do the extension was to get the opportunity to reopen the expenditure period. The Great Recession between, say, 2007 and 2013, there was not a lot of, well, there was very little development in our business park, and we kind of remained status quo. Based on the TID rules, the expenditure period for the TID closed in January of 2020. And the projects that we're talking about are actually part of the original TID 1 project plan, and I'm going to send a copy of that over to Chair Robinson. But what's going to drive that closure is the fact that a significant portion of the village's valuation is now tied up in our TID. And ultimately, we want to return that to the village tax base for the benefits that provides to us, and ultimately provides to the school district, provides to the tech, and provides to the county. So the primary driver for us was that lag kind of in the middle of our TID caused by the Great Recession, and our desire not to over-borrow against the TID to build out infrastructure, because there really wasn't any development going on. As we came out of the Great Recession, development in the business park really picked up in 2014, and we've had a significant development resulting in essentially building out our business park completely. And we had that space north of Highway 29, but really no access to it, no infrastructure in place. So our ability to continue to grow our economic development program was predicated on being able to build out that area. The thought process in working with Ehlers, who's our financial contractor, and with Veerbecker, who's our engineering contractor, was if we can leverage the benefits of TID number 1 to help us jumpstart that project north of Highway 29, that would be the easiest path for us to pursue, and allows us to continue to use the engine that we have in TID number 1. Once we get to 2035, it's fully our plan to return that valuation to our community and to the county and to the school district and to the tech, and potentially at that point open another TID. But there's a significant portion of our community that is tied up in the TID right now, and that's a driver for us to close it at 2035.
Other questions? If not, thank you for joining us. Go ahead.
Andy, do you want to talk about, you talked about $22.5 million in non-TID related development that you're projecting as part of your project. Can you give us any explanation of what that is and time frame on that build out and your best estimates, if you have them already, in terms of what that means for county tax base?
So, yes, I can talk about that. Yeah, I need to talk about it. So essentially, we have been working with a number of developers, both commercial, industrial, and residential, not only in the TID area, but in the surrounding area. Because when we build out that infrastructure, it now extends the village's utility infrastructure so that there's 100 acres north of our business park, for example, was annexed into the village 4 years ago, which was earmarked essentially for residential development in our comprehensive plan. Getting the water and sewer infrastructure to the north part of our business park allows us to tie into that. So a big component of that $22.5 million is a pretty significant subdivision north of Highway 29 in the village of Marathon City on that 100 acres of land. The other element is we're talking to a couple of other companies who are going to be located in close proximity to the borders of our TID district, in the village, but not in the TID district. So that would be a development that would occur non-TID, would generate revenue. Timing for those is probably within the next 18 to 36 months for those projects to start. And that's predicated on us completing the infrastructure build out with this. And we're working through all the lead times and everything with that right now. So I'd say 18 to 36 months for that. In terms of non-TID projects, we're anticipating that the tax revenue generated, the county's portion of that's about $58,565 a year annually. And over a 10-year period, that's $585,000. When we look at that, we do the calculation based on the investment that we're asking for from the county, and you tie to that the sales tax revenue that would come in with that. We're looking at about $1.3 million in revenue over 10 years, so it's a 30% ROI. And that's the sheet that I had attached to the front. So that information is in there. So tax-wise, yeah, it's going to generate 71,000, excuse me, in property tax and 58,000 in sales tax.
Are you putting in any of your ARPA funds into this project?
We have invested our ARPA funds in a water and sewer project to extend to a new daycare that was built in town. So we have allocated our funds, and that's where that went. So we did a water and sewer extension on the east end of town to support the Little Lions Daycare Center, which was sorely needed in our community. And that investment was made last year, and we're waiting for a second payment from Department of Revenue to help us pay that off. But that's already been invested in water and sewer on the east side of town.
Chair Gibbs.
Just because one of the discussion points has always been on TIDs, especially for a county, is the economic benefit that is generated in one versus another. So we get a war between municipalities, and so the question I have ultimately comes down to how many of the businesses that are in the business park would have been businesses that are inside of Marathon County's borders, regardless of whether they now stand inside the TID. So
Any of the current
the
businesses
current
in the
TID,
business
the
park?
current businesses in the TID, that includes any new businesses that are brought into that TID, were businesses that were within the walls of Marathon County. So, in other words, if I'm stealing a business or if I'm transferring a business from Rothschild to the village of Marathon, economically, I haven't really changed the value to the county, especially if that business was going to build somewhere.
To my knowledge, and I don't have the history on all of the businesses out there, I believe there is only one that, well, I'll take it back, two that have relocated from other communities to Marathon City. And we're a member of McDevco. We're part of the intercommunity agreement that if one company in a town is in a location and they approach us, we communicate with that town. In both of those cases, those communities did not have space available to allow for those businesses to remain in those communities. From the other businesses, there's several that moved in from outside of the county into the community, and several of them actually relocated within the village themselves to expand their businesses. So Mishka Oil, which is now Wagner Oil, was an old Citgo station downstairs or downtown. They moved out towards the interchange, tripled the size of their building, and that was probably the best business decision that Dwayne ever made. In terms of economic benefit for our community. It brought a new restaurant, a much larger service station, and a lot of revenue to the community through sales tax and property tax. The dental office, which now actually is Dave's office downtown, they wanted to expand their practice. There was not a practical place for them to do that downtown. They located out to the business park. S.E. Swiderski is a resident in there. They're doing a project right now. They've got 32 apartments in there. So they're in the county, but they're locating all over. So it's not a draw out of another community. So I'd say, from my best estimate, there's only two.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, thank you again
All right,
for
thank you.
presentation. City of Mozambique Historic Library Window Restoration. That's who.
Good afternoon. I'm Jeff Gates. I'm the Mozambique City Administrator. I'd like to thank the committee for giving me the opportunity to be before you this afternoon to provide you a brief summary of our funding request. I see in your packet you have a complete application along with photographs related to our request, so I'm just going to be very brief with my comments and be happy to answer any committee questions. For those members of the committee that aren't aware, the Desert Public Library is located in downtown Mozambique, right on Main Street. It is a historical building. It was built in actually 1898, and then it was deeded to the village and now the city of Mozambique back in 1906 by Joseph Desert, who is one of the, I guess you can call him the founding fathers of Mozambique, a very successful businessman. The building was put on the National Historic Register back in 1980. And as I noted in the application, this building being in the National Historic Register is only one of 7 National Register historic buildings outside of the city of Wausau in Marathon County. So it's a very important historical building, not just for the city of Mozambique, but for the county as well. The city is asking for funding to assist with restoring the windows in the building. These are wooden windows that need to be restored. Because we're on the National Register, we have to be very careful of what we do. We can't just go in and put in new aluminum windows inside the building in order for it to stay on the National Register. So we are going to hire someone to come in to actually restore the wooden windows properly. We're looking at a cost of that of about $50,000, and at the same time, the walls of the building, which is a brick building, as you can see from the pictures, also need to be tuck pointed as well to maintain the integrity of the building. That's about $25,000. So the city is requesting respectfully $75,000 in funding from the county for this project, for this very important building. The Joseph Desert Library, as the committee is probably well aware, is in the county's library system, a very successful county library branch, and we're very proud of it, and I'm sure the county is as well. I'll be happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
So again, I will ask the question of all governmental units. Are you putting any of your ARPA funds in?
All of our ARPA funds right now are committed to, half of our funds are committed to repainting the inside of a water tower that desperately needed to be done in our business park. And then we have some street projects that we're doing, as well as we just completed a complete replacement of our police radio system that was badly needed for safety purposes of our police. Their radios at times weren't working in certain buildings, including the school district buildings. And in light of times, you know how important that is. So we just finished the replacement of those radios. I see Mr. Billups in the back shaking his head. Yes, he's well aware of what we did with regards to that. So that's what we've been using our ARPA funds for.
Other questions? If not, thank you. Go ahead.
Absent ARPA funds, what's the plan?
Absent ARPA funds, what's the plan? We'll look at community foundations to try to assist us with doing it. Not that I'm aware of, no. Unfortunately, there's a lot of them in the country, so. Just gives you the ability to say it's on the National Register.
Any other questions? If not, thank you very much,
Thank you
Jim.
very much.
Mr. Chairman, can we take, duct cleaning pieces?
We've had a request to take items 9 and 10 out of order.
Actually, 7, 8, 9.
7, 8, 9, and 10 out of order.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If there's no objection, these are facilities projects, and I'll be very brief in kicking it off, and then Terry can take any questions you might have. As with all of the other projects you're going to hear about today, their applications are in your packet. With respect to number 7, the HVAC replacement within jail administration, that project, as you likely recall, was recently funded with the county's borrowing that was approved at a recent meeting. So respectfully, I think you can remove that from your consideration. We had put that project application together just in the event that the county wanted to move in that direction. But again, this committee addressed that at a previous meeting. With respect to items 8, 9, and 10, simply put, those are kind of in line with the direction from the committee and the board over the last 2 years to really start to take a different approach to routine maintenance. And as you can tell from the applications, duct cleaning, air handler cleaning, those are routine maintenance items. There are best practice considerations that you should have ducts cleaned at the very least every 10 years. We had fallen behind historically with that preventative maintenance work. So again, in keeping with the direction from the board of, and again, this is my phrase, but just fix it. We have been addressing that backlog over the last 2 years. We've made considerable headway. These last 3 projects with respect to the Juvenile Detention Center, courthouse, and library are the last vestige of that backlog. We do have a funding strategy. If you do not desire to use ARPA funds to fund us, to allow us to do that and get back to kind of up to date within the next year, it would take us 2 years to do it. That's our strategy. We have a plan in place to address the backlog. This is simply a way to do that a little bit quicker. But the projects are pretty simple. They're set forth in terms of their scope within the project requests. And if you have any questions, Terry can take them, but that's the background I wanted to provide.
Are there any questions? So you, go ahead, Cody.
I think because for the HVAC, because it's already done through CHIP, but I just wanted to know if through the HVAC, is that include like filters that would filter out COVID or any other thing like that?
No, it's not filters, it's the ductwork and the air handler systems themselves.
So
Filters are changed on a routine basis anyhow every 6 months.
I'll paraphrase what Terry was saying. No, there's no filters. It's not, COVID mitigation. This is truly routine maintenance to, just like you went within your house, right? You're supposed to clean the vents and air handling systems within your house on a routine basis. We're going through and making sure that we're kind of up to best practice every 10 years.
Well, your question was directed not at these duct cleaning projects, but rather the jail HVAC project that was pulled. So did that one have additional filtration equipment going in place as part of the project?
Are we referring to the new HVAC that was put in for the jail and the kitchen? That's what we're talking about now? Okay, the air handler system that was there was shut off. It was not functioning at all. So it was simply a replacement unit that was put in, obviously a higher efficiency unit, but no, it's just a new air handler unit, and that area was cleaned actually last year, so.
Okay, are there any other questions relative to the Supervisor Baker?
So I recently became informed of our 4204 resolution. So since these are ongoing expenses and the county has a policy not to fund ongoing expenses with one-time funding, do we need to have a resolution to offset that?
That will be one of the factors that we will look at when we evaluate the projects at the next meeting or at the subsequent meeting. It's consistency with our guidelines.
Thank you.
Other questions for Terry? If not, thank you. Now we'll go back to the Fire Department Communications and Alerting Infrastructure Upgrade. I think you're up here for the rest of the... You're going to keep him in line?
So if I could just go back to the question that was posed about if I could just go back to the question that was posed about the air handling system and COVID in the jail. We still do a screening in the jail, just so you're aware of it, and we have a negative pressure cell, so that anyone who has tuberculosis or COVID, and now that we have it isolated and it's not in the jail, that person could be in that room, and we have the ability to pump that directly outside through a different air system, so it does isolate it. So we have mitigation strategies within the jail. So we have a number of projects in front of you today. Some of them I know better than others. This first one I don't know as well, so I've asked Captain Milhausen to come in and speak about it regarding the Marathon County Fire Department communication alerting infrastructure.
Thank you for allowing me to come. Give you, obviously in your packet, it outlines kind of what the project is, but just to touch a little bit, it's broken into two sections. It's the Phoenix G2 station alerting, which benefits our fire departments and our ambulance services when they're being paged out. The other side of it is what's called the Freedom app. Freedom app is a mobile application that is installed in the responding units, the med, the fire engine, and it allows them to see live time the information coming from our CAD and dispatch, the computer-aided dispatching system that we have at the 911 center. What this allows is for quicker and more consistent paging and alerting, and it also allows the responders with the Freedom app to be able to see live time what's taking place as notes get entered. They can see their call times, their response times. They can clear themselves, they can put themselves on the call, en route, things like that, clear themselves at the end, different things like that. A lot of opportunities that the Freedom app offers. There are a lot of law enforcement entities that in the county that are using Freedom app. Our detective bureau uses it, command staff uses it. It gives us an opportunity to see the calls and what's going without actually having an actual mobile data computer in our squads or with us. The station alerting, just give you a kind of a quick success story with that is being utilized right now with the city of Wausau, Safer, and Riverside. And just because it's being the minute my dispatch staff enters the call in the CAD and they hit enter, it immediately, an automated voice off of that information pages them and alerts them. I was just talking to Chief Bartek a couple days ago, and he said their response times are reduced about 45 seconds out the door. That doesn't sound like a lot, but in the city, minutes count, and even more so does that count out in the rural part of our county. And that's what this is for, is to try and get those out into the station alerting. The G2, I want to put in 7 ambulance. I want to try and get into the ambulance services first. Because ambulance service is by far our greater volume of calls. So I would like to get them into the outlying 7 agencies that don't have something like that. And then the Freedom, there are multiple departments in the rural area of the county that do have it, but there are 4 that don't. So I would like to outfit the remaining 4 with that. What the ARPA funds would account for is the initial purchase of the equipment and installation and a 1 year of everything to get it up and running. In the ARPA application that you'll see, I made reference to a $22,000 amount of money that is already out there. I would like to discontinue that program once we were up and running with G2 and Freedom and shift that money to the ongoing expense of G2 and Freedom. And then obviously I would ask the local fire departments to augment that if they're going to use more license than what we would be offering with that $22,000. I know that it's been a public safety issue multiple times about our paging and our alerting and things like that. This has proven. We have Hamburg Fire Department right now, being they're in one of those I'll call troubled areas. We've been piloting it with them on both the Freedom and the G2. We're getting really good feedback from them in their remote location that it's working well. They've only been running Freedom for about a month, so we're still looking for more data there, and they haven't had a lot of calls, but they like what they've been seeing so far. They've been on G2 for probably close to 3 months now, and they really like G2. They get their information a lot quicker, and there's a lot more information being delivered over that than what's coming in on I Am Responding. That's the program that it would be replacing, is I Am Responding. If you have any questions, I certainly would be willing to answer those.
So do we typically pay for all the cost of these systems for the other departments?
So if we really go back historically, the county did pay for the initial pagers and radios and all that a number of years before my time, as the county had received a grant, is my understanding, and we bought 1,700 radios, pagers, the like, to outfit all the fire departments. We have discontinued that part of it, and we have told them they have to stand on their own when it comes to anything like that. I think there is also a huge benefit to the county and my 911 center in utilizing these tools, and it's at a much less cost than what the radio pager program was. But to answer your question, no, we don't typically. We have discontinued that. We do, though, pay for the I am responding, which is, in essence, a very similar tool that we're paying for right now for all of the departments.
Chair Gibbs?
Thank you, Captain Milhausen. I guess the question becomes, seriously, we've had some challenges with our dispatch. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, and buts about it. Stratford area, Hamburg area, town of Texas area, it's all known to us. The question becomes, what kind of technology are we utilizing here that, it's not cell phone and obviously airwaves are the challenge with the, penetration into buildings for tripping pagers. So is this technology using something different that's more, or is the broadband expansion that we're doing with Bug Tussle, is that going to potentially solve some of the challenges otherwise? Also, so I guess I'm asking two questions.
Yep, excellent questions. So I'll answer the first one by saying that it is cell phone based. So is the I am responding that they're using now.
Right.
So if they're able to get I am responding now, which we've received very good responses and coverage with that, there's no reason we wouldn't be able to maintain that same with Freedom or G2. For the Freedom side of it, it's actually really amped up on that because it's a higher wattage cradle point, the same type of connectivity we have in our squad cars. We put that into and that is ultimately an expense that falls on the fire departments going forward. There's an ongoing cell bill with FirstNet that's roughly, I think it's $30 a month. So that would be a charge that, in my proposal to them, is that they're going to be responsible for that ongoing charge. And the second part of it is, yes, with Bug Tussle and already the towers that they've put up down in Leather Camp and things like that, we've seen a tremendous amount of improvement in our cell coverage already. I think they put one up there, then one out in Bevent. In both of those areas, we've seen improvement already with our coverage, and I think that's just going to get better. We were, as you well know, very active, myself and Jerry Klein, in kind of designing where that went to where we thought our trouble areas were, with some of this technology in mind.
All right, thank you.
Cody?
So my understanding of this is that some of the departments have this system already in place and some don't, and this would ensure that they all have consistency throughout, so everyone's on the same Freedom app and the other system, correct?
Yes. So right now, the full-time fire departments of Riverside, Safer, and Wausau are on the Phoenix G2, the station alerting, and they have a more robust system that, to be honest with you, it's $50,000 per station, but that gives them, being they sleep there and things like that, there's message boards, there's sirens, there's things like that. In our rural areas, we don't have that, so that's a lot less cost involved. This is roughly $100 per year user on a mobile app. There's a one-time, roughly $1,000 setup charge per station to put in their paging tones and things like that. So yes, I have, and there again, I have not included every fire department on this. I went the route of getting meds on board first, so that's what the ARPA fund was for. I didn't want this to be too big of an ask, and by far we have more med calls than we do fire calls. So I felt that was more prudent to make that ask. And on the other side of it, for the Freedom, we do have some agencies, Mr. Gibbs spoke of Stratford. Stratford has taken the bull by the horns, if you will, with some new leadership, and they have put Freedom in, and they're using Freedom. Mozambique is using Freedom. So there's fewer that we need to do there. That's why the difference of the 7 and the 4. So some of them have taken it on themselves to do it. So that kind of proves to you that they are seeing and they're talking to their counterparts that there's a benefit to this. Anybody else? Thank you very much.
So the next project that we have is a digital forensic lab, Faraday Enclosure, and a mobile device forensic tool upgrade. Since putting this request in, we are going to remove the mobile device forensic tool upgrade, which is the most costly portion of this. We were able to not only build some partnerships with other agencies, but also received a grant, and that grant will be paying for a large portion of that digital forensic tool. And the agencies that we're partnering with, some of them larger, the Eau Claire area, and we have considerations from the Green Bay Police Department and the Appleton Police Department to be a partner with us in that, to share in those expenses. So we can remove that. So what we're really talking about is, I believe it's around $50,000 or $60,000 for a Faraday enclosure. What a Faraday enclosure is what we use now are something called Faraday bags. In essence, it's a bag that has a lining in it so that if we go on, let's say, an internet crimes against children, so a child pornography case, and we seize tablets or phones or whatever that might be, we stick those items in a bag. Someone still has the ability to send out a signal to that device to say, wipe it, clear it, get rid of the evidence. So the minute that we remove it from the bag and we begin to do that evidence check, we run the risk that the phone could be wiped and we can't stop it. Thereby, we lose the evidence in a very significant case. This Faraday enclosure, in essence, is a large tent. It's big enough that we can put a small lab inside of it. We can pull the device, and we're able to go and extract the evidence off of that device and be assured that we're not going to lose critical evidence in things like child crimes cases. So we would look to take that tent, if you will, and place it in a meeting room that we have in the basement of the courthouse, or the sheriff's office portion, and that would become a workstation in those very sensitive cases.
So the one question that I had in looking at that is, if we are this center and you currently have one forensics person, will the partnership result in additional demands on the department, or will other departments?
So what we have is what we call the Wisconsin River Valley Digital Forensic Lab. That lab has 2 full-time people in it. One is a City of Wausau detective and one is a county detective. But if another partner agency, we partner with Portage County, Taylor County, Langley County, Anago, Merrill, Medford, if they buy in, they have a buy-in to be a part of that. So that covers all of the expenses for, like, currently we're paying out of their buy-in for this mobile forensic device tool. And that chews up a lot of that money. So to buy other things is difficult. But when they buy in, they commit to a person. So if they need to have a device examined, they have to send a person with a device, and that person does the work. So it doesn't make more work for us. It just creates that secure environment for extracting the evidence.
And that's a permanent, there's no ongoing licensing fees with that, that's a permanent?
It's actually like if you were to go buy a pop-up tent at any one of these retailers, but it's specially lined so that it can't receive a signal inside of it, locks it down.
That would be nice.
Yeah, take it on vacation.
That's what I was thinking.
$55,000 tent? Wait a minute.
And any other questions on that request?
All right, so you'll submit an update.
Was it competitively bid?
No, right now, we just got quotes for it in order to put together the request. We will definitely, on something like that, go out and get competitive bids.
Thank you.
Supervisor Leahy has a question.
Go ahead.
What is like the shelf life on something like this? How long do you expect a piece of equipment to last?
Inside a controlled environment, 10, 15, 20 years.
Any other questions? If not, we'll move on to the jail property and person scanner.
So the jail property and person scanner project, I may need a little bit of help from Captain Milhausen on this one because he actually accompanied our jail inspector yesterday on the jail inspection that occurred here. Most jails of our size, most modern jails have what is a person scanner in it. These scanners have become incredibly important in detecting whether or not a person has on or secreted inside their person contraband or weapons. So what will happen is a person will come into the jail when as they're being brought in, they will stand inside the scanner, much like you do when you go to the airport at TSA. It will do a scan and it will let us know whether or not they have a weapon or contraband that we aren't able to see or during our search find through the naked eye. In addition to this, we would look at bringing in an x-ray machine, much like the x-ray machine that everyone comes through, where your packages come through when you come into the courthouse in order to scan personal property. There are times that people come into our jail with garbage bags full of their every possession that they own. And it becomes incredibly time-consuming to go through and search every one of those when all we're looking for is contraband or weapons or whatever it might be. So yesterday, and I'd let Captain Milhausen speak on this if he would, he had a conversation with a jail inspector about this exact issue.
Thank you, Chief. The last 2 times we've had our jail inspection, I've had the opportunity to accompany Jody Hollister, who is from the Department of Corrections, who does our jail inspection. And both times she's questioned whether or not we are going to be getting a body scanner, is what she refers to it as. She asked, I know they're expensive, but we're at the southern end of her reach, us in Wood County, and she covers the remainder of the northern part. And she has told me on both visits that I've been a part of that the amount of contraband on these counties and these facilities that have these has been reduced tremendously. She augmented that by also asking what our plans were to look at or obtain a mail scanning software program. That is something that we are interested in. That coupled with the body scanner, she said, has all but eliminated an avenue by means to get contraband into the cells. What the mail scanner does is the mail comes in and it gets scanned and it then arrives to the inmate via a tablet and they can read their stuff that way. So no physical mail needs to be delivered, searched, or hand delivered into the cell with something either soaked and absorbed into the paper or whatever it may be. I mean, we see many, many different forms that it's introduced into our facility. So I think it's just prudent for the committee to know that the jail inspector has made mention of this. Much smaller counties than us do have this in place, so I believe it is something that we should consider to help reduce the opportunity for things being introduced into our secure facility.
Are there any other potential funding sources for that?
There were early on with the early Arpa funds, and many counties went, and that's why I'm sure she's asking, is many counties went and bought these body scanners. They're all over the state now. The challenge we have is the first part of the request, which is we don't have space for it. So in order to accommodate a body scanner, what we would have to do is we would have to take property rooms and move our large property room over to where our Huber unit was. As you may or may not know, the Sheriff's Office no longer does Huber services here in Marathon County. Instead, we use electronic monitoring. So we would take the locker rooms that were there and we would turn that into a large property room, thereby making space for this body scanner to be just outside of and near the reception area when you come into our jail. So this is a construction project along with the equipment that would be needed to scan these things. And I just want to be clear that the The X-ray machine and the body scanner are different from the mail scanning. That's actually a separate piece, but it's all something we need to do as a package from our perspective to control contraband in the jail. This is just that first prong, and we'll be moving to the mail scanning in the future.
Supervisor Leahy, and then Chair Gibbs.
Thank you. So are you saying that the construction costs are included in the request here?
They are.
They are, okay. And then I know that you marked that this wouldn't necessarily be a cost savings, but could it potentially cut down on staff time in these searches that you're doing over the long term?
What it will definitely do is cut down on liability risk, because once we suspect that someone has contraband on them, we go through a whole process of getting a warrant, going to the hospital, and getting cavity searches and so forth done. If we did this, which oftentimes can become a fight with physicians, and it also can result in lawsuits. So the ability to have this device take a picture and say, there's something there, and we can prove that there's something there, now we're gonna go and get that warrant. That would be a huge benefit. And to your point with speeding things up, yes, there would be efficiencies like with scanning property through the X-ray machine, because we wouldn't have to take all that time to one by one go through all kinds of property.
Chair Gibbs.
Just a question on the mail scanner, and I know that's not part of this project, and I appreciate that, but I seen a special on, I believe it was 60 Minutes or something, that was showing how stuff was actually being introduced through the mail into facilities such as, LSD, even though that's antiquated drug, but soaked into paper and then dried, and then the people would utilize the paper that was delivered. So do we have an estimate on what the mail scanner would be in cost?
This is going to be part of a much larger project, which is a review of our commissary inmate telephone, inmate video visitation, because oftentimes that's part of the package, and we will get it for nothing.
Okay.
So that we believe, and when you do those other ones, we receive we bring in revenue, if you will, from those products that we sell to inmates. But that money can only be used for the inmate's benefit. So things like indigency packets, mattresses, cable TV, that's how that is taken care of. So as part of that package, which is something we hope to write an RFP on, either late this fall or next spring, we will be tackling that problem.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? If not, if you want to move on to the tasers.
So the next one is kind of a unique one, and we debated on whether or not to present it, but either way, we thought that it was important that we bring it before the board. Tasers have become an integral part of every law enforcement agency. The state of Wisconsin now requires them as part of our training. They are part of the Department of Justice Training and Standards curriculum. When officers come out of the academy, they're trained in their use. And I don't know that you're going to find an agency in this country that doesn't have them. So we have had them here at the Sheriff's Office since about 2005. We now have a fleet of them totaling approximately 115 between the jail and our patrol deputies. We still have tasers from 2005. They still work, they still function, and we would keep them in service. The problem is that 46 of those tasers we learned earlier this year, they are no longer going to make the batteries for them. So in essence, they become paperweights. So we have 46 tasers that need to be replaced, and we need to come up with a plan for how to do that. The proposal you have in front of you is the replacement of those 46 tasers. They have a latest and greatest model. We bought a couple of them. We will tell you we should not go with those. They're breaking regularly. Even Taser has identified that they're not reliable, so we're going to go with we would like to go with the middle of the road Taser, which we have a number of in service, and they've been very reliable. So those 46 Tasers, a 5-year warranty, which is customary that we typically purchase with any Taser we buy, and holsters, and I believe the initial cartridge total the $77,000 request that we've given to you. They have remained pretty consistent. As I've said, we've had this batch from well before the two new releases, so they're pretty durable. I don't want to come in here and tell you they're a one-time purchase because anything can happen. But eventually, over time, they will be phased out, or a company will come in and say they're obsolete.
Are there any questions? Okay. Then it's the Sheriff's Office Training and Resource Center replacement.
So I'm going to try to pull this one up here. I got to figure out where we put it on the list.
Way at the end.
I think they're out of order, maybe potentially, but either way. The sheriff's office has a building, the county has a building out on 72nd Avenue at Stewart Avenue. It is the old Peterbilt E.J. Peter trucking site. That site has served us well for many years, but about the time these requests came out, we were approached by facilities and told, hey, you guys need to look at doing a request for funding. That building is in need of a roof. All of the siding needs to be replaced. The doors need to be replaced, and it needs insulation. In essence, it's leaking all kinds of heat in the winter. It's not fuel or energy efficient at all. And they were estimating that to repair the building was going to be somewhere in the area of $1.3 million to do all of that work, which begged the question, why would we think about putting $1.3 million into that building if we could potentially build new? So what we did was we reached out to Jamie Polly at the Parks Department, knowing that there is land on the south side of 29 near our juvenile detention center, near Sunnyvale Park, that is owned by the county. We wanted to make sure that she was okay with this proposal, and she is. What we would consider doing is placing a structure there that would house our special teams vehicles. So this would include things like the bomb vehicle, the dive vehicles. We have a mobile command post, a dispatch trailer, a SWAT vehicle, some of that equipment that needs to be housed indoors. We would place it at a site there, and the estimate at that, when we were first contemplating this, facilities came in with an estimate of right around $3.4 million. So our logic went to, if it's going to cost $1.3 million to repair the building, and that land that we have that building on right now is worth something, what would that land be worth, and would it make sense that the county sell that land that we're currently sitting on and build something new? And what I realize is that there are a lot of other discussions that are taking place around facilities planning and site planning. So more than anything else, we want to get this on your radar, let you know that it's a challenge, and that facilities is interested in doing some work to that site in order to make it energy efficient, and this is yet another option.
So it's a preliminary heads up to be developed.
Heads up, something's going to have to be done at some point, but in having conversations with the county administrator, what we need to know is, okay, what would it take? I mean, can we put a 5-year Band-Aid on this? Is it something that needs to be done faster than that? And those are some of the things that we need facilities to help us with. And we were just looking at all the options out there.
Are there any questions? So we'll look for more to come on that, both in terms of property transfers, approval, and ARPA request going forward.
ARPA, CIP, master plan, I think that all are options, but you should know that it's something we need to start talking about.
Okay. Are there any questions? If not, we look forward to hearing and seeing you again. So we'll update you'll update your proposals as it reflects the changes in the first one in the Faraday, and
We can certainly do that.
so we've got that before us. So we would appreciate that. Any questions? Right, if not, again, the intent is to hear presentations on the remainder at our next meeting, and then I think that Supervisor Baker raises a good point. We need to go back and revisit our resolutions and the policies and procedures that we've laid out. So we'll have those presentations and then go through the criteria that we have set, and ultimately, it's a decision of the county board, and will require a 2/3 vote of the board to make these expenditures possible. So look at doing that and presenting that to the county board in July.
As your commissioner, we're going to go back to the phone for a special meeting.
You were welcome to leave at any time, but we appreciate your staying and learning and sharing with us. Thank you. All right, we will go back now to item A, budget timeline and payroll and timeline for payroll and operational functions. Christie, is that you? Thanks, Jeff.
Hi. Summer's for vacations, road traffic, and the start of the annual budget process. So it's a lot of fun. And think of it as a budget for your house. We just add more zeros on the end of the numbers, but it's kind of the same thing. But you've got all kinds of different things that we do. So I'm going to go through real quick how the operational part of it goes. So we start in July. What we're going to do for this committee is bring you some proposed budget assumptions. And 2/3 of our budget really is people and our employees. So you're going to see a lot of them for what we're going to do for proposed cost of living, health insurance, life insurance, workers' comp, unemployment, and dental is really the ones that you'll see based on that. And then we'll have some operational cost increases or decreases based on what we know now. And more than ever, what we know now is maybe not what you're going to see when we ask you for final like thumbs up on what we have as our preliminary budget assumptions that we can build into the model. So we'll be coming with those in June and July and asking for you to just give your thumbs up so that we can make sure that we have everything put together for our 2023 budget process. Yep.
That be there. Lance, where are we relative to the compensation study? When will that roll?
I can get firm dates for when we anticipate having the estimates to implement the plan, but right now, all departments, just in terms of the work that they've done thus far, the consultant has asked all departments to essentially compile information for the consultants to go out to the quote-unquote market, identify comparables for our internal jobs to help us assess what is an appropriate market rate compensation. So all departments have identified every job description across our 750 employees, and at least one position questionnaire, that's the term that they used, has been completed by an employee within that class, reviewed by that employee's direct supervisor, and reviewed by that employee's department head. Those position questionnaires have been provided to the consultant for their initial review. So they've identified those comparable governmental entities as well as some comparable private sector and nonprofit entities. But I can get for you, Chair Robinson, when we expect to have that firm information back to, quite honestly, inform administration where we need to be in terms of pay increases for the 2023 budget.
So we'll need to factor those into the assumption as soon as possible.
Yeah, as Christie said, really, this is going to be more so even perhaps than a normal year, a very iterative process. You will have the best information that we can provide to you at the time that we have it, but we certainly recognize, and this has been the case in the last several years with respect to health insurance is a good example. Your budget assumption that we ask you to approve relative to health insurance is the budget assumption As best we understand it at the time, that certainly doesn't mean that those numbers can't change, and I would anticipate we're going to have an assumption with respect to compensation increases that will most likely change based on the information from the consultant. But I can get you a more up-to-date kind of milestone event calendar for that class compensation study.
Sorry, Chrissy, sorry for derailing the discussion, but
that's-
that's very material to that.
Yep, so we're gonna start bringing those, and on your August 8th meeting, we're going to have you say this, these are the ones that we're gonna move forward to, and we'll start implementing those into the system, and like Lance said, it can change, and we can do that, but we're gonna start somewhere, and that's when we need to start, so it'll be the August 8th meeting, and we'll be providing those to you, and we'll be talking to you about those in all of our meetings running up to that point as well. And then what happens, and I'm going to tell you how a county with a county administrator as the operational manager for a county with a county administrator works. So what we do is we will get those assumptions back from you based on our best estimates we have now. And then our county administrator will send out a notice of what his assumptions are and what his guidelines are for every department to build their 2023 budget. And those assumptions and that information will be going out to the departments middle of August. They will build their budgets based on those assumptions and be getting back to Lance that information, and we put it on the computer and have it there around Labor Day. He will then be meeting with all of the departments around Labor Day through maybe the second or third week of September, making any changes he wants. So right now you have several levels of a budget. The first level is the department requested. So finance, I get instruction marching orders from county administration, and I put my budget together and I submit it to finance to upload. And then Lance, as county administrator, will meet with my department and we'll go over my budget to see if I met his guidelines or not. And then he would make changes to the budget, and it's called the county administrator budget at that point. So he takes over the budget on the next phase and makes whatever changes that he feels are necessary to meet the targets that were set. Once he has a budget that's been put together and meets all the criteria, he then presents that budget to this committee, the HR Finance Committee, and that will be the your October, and I believe it's October 12th, is the meeting that you have, that he will present his budget to you. You then deliberate over that budget and can make any changes that are legal. Don't cross paths. One thing that you can't do is you can't borrow for operations. So we can't just say, well, you know what, let's just borrow 50 million and that will take care of, half the county's operations or toilet paper or whatever. You can't do that. So there are criteria, but there's also criteria that you set for us to follow. You will have that, you will deliberate. The one most important thing is that you need to make a decision on what budget you want to forward to the county board by October 17th. Because you have a budget hearing on November 3rd, and we must post the proposed budget no later than 15 days prior to that meeting. And I also need a day or two to get it to the paper and review their proof to make sure that it meets all the requirements by statute. So you'll be talking about it the early part of October. You'll have a decision. You'll say, this is our budget. This is what we are going to forward to the county board, and you'll have that done by no later than October 17th. And then it's kind of frozen in time. We publish and say there will be a public hearing on this date, and you can come and you can attend and you can ask questions. You can say, I love it, it's great, good job. Or other things if you have concerns or questions. Then that is the public hearing night. The county board doesn't get to change it on that night. It's still frozen, but they can talk about it, they can ask questions. And then what you would do as a county board, I'm just grabbing the date, I believe it is on November 10th, you then approve the 2023 annual county budget. So that is what we will be doing all summer and through the fall and all the way up to just before Thanksgiving. And so we'll give you more information, but that is how a budget in a county, a Wisconsin county with a county administrator would work. So it goes from department to county administrator to the finance committee to county board. And in that time period, once you approve it and forward it to the county board, there is a hearing, but at that time, no changes can be made, but plenty of discussion. And with that, if there's any questions other than that, then what we will be doing is bringing you more information as it goes. But that's our general annual process.
So do you have dates? So our normal October meeting would be the 12th.
Correct.
Based on the new rules. And we typically accept the administrator's budget, and then we don't finalize our action at that time, but rather come back later. So if the 17th is our date for action, then can we meet on the 17th? Should we plan on meeting on the 17th?
I would prefer if you would do it earlier. I have to email the paper that day so that I need to email the paper that day so that I can get a proof back from them to verify the information so that it can be published within the 15-day time window.
Then the concern is, do we need to move the presentation? So the presentation of the budget will occur when?
To the county board or to you?
To this committee?
Well, you usually have 2 meetings, but currently your board rules state that you meet the second Wednesday of the month.
Unless
So
we have a
that's-
special meeting.
Yep, so you could definitely make a special meeting, but I just used the one meeting that you had currently. You will also do a presentation to the county board at their educational meeting on October 20th, typically. I need to publish it the week before.
So I guess that's what I'm searching for. So Lance, will you be in a position on the 27th of September to present the budget to this body? Or do we want to go into the following week? We can work on that. I'm sort of I'm doing this for the purposes of alerting the committee, but I also want to make sure that we think through. One of the possibilities would be for a presentation of the budget on the 3rd, so we're not interfering with other committees on that Monday. But we'll have that discussion, and we'll give you that timeline. One of the questions that I have is that given the fact that we have so many new county board members, in the past, we've taken presentations to the county board relative to some of the budget assumptions, so I'm assuming that we will do that again this year. I think in particular, we will need to do that so that if there are concerns in the development or the foundation of the budget, we know those before we get to the actual budget itself. So let's make sure we build that in to have a presentation and get feedback from the county board.
The presentation I had tentatively thought of would be October 20th, which is your educational meeting.
This would be for the budget assumptions.
Oh, yeah.
Right, right. So we'll need to build that into the process as well. This would be, so we don't get to the board and find out we did it all wrong.
That wouldn't happen. Is there any other questions? There's a whole bunch of other things that are going to be overwhelming, and we'll put the right timeline together so when we give you one, we hope we don't change it too many times after that. But there's really a lot of different things that we have to follow and look at. So as we go through this process, we'll let you know what those things are. There's some really important dates, and we will get those to you as well. So.
Did you have a question? Okay. All right, is there any other questions? If not, what we'll maybe do for the next meeting is bring back a hard copy of a proposed schedule reflecting those, and to the best we can, trying to project when those dates will be. All right, thank you.
There will be one special meeting that is coming up in September. One of the airport is owned by Marathon in Portage County, And so one of their rules is that the Marathon and Portage County Finance committees will meet jointly in order to approve their department budget. So we are tentatively scheduling that meeting in coordination with Portage County, but you will meet typically about 5 o'clock one evening at the airport or remotely so that you can approve that. So that is one slight wrinkle that's special to Marathon County and the airport that we will also have involved for that one. So that's why there may be one additional date.
Presentation on the delivery of jail medical services. Administrator Leonard. And Chad?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I will tee it up and Chad will answer all the important questions. But this was on your agenda, and if anyone attended the Public Safety Committee meeting or you watched the recording or watched it live on Wausau Area Access Media, you all have already heard this, but we had been having some issues relative to service delivery for jail medical services within the county jail. And and Chad can elaborate on this, but by statute and administrative code provisions, the sheriff's office of any county in which a jail is operated has certain medical services that it must provide to inmates during their stay. And simply put, there are two ways that you can deliver any service, right? As a county, you can deliver it directly through county staff, or you can contract with a provider to do that. Historically, Marathon County has been in that second camp, that contractual service provision model, as have the majority of counties throughout the state of Wisconsin. Nevertheless, as I indicated, we began having some service delivery concerns, and we won't get into details on those, but that led us to this point of we may need to make a change in how we deliver those services that we're required to deliver. So thinking back to the Wisconsin Counties Association presentation, you might think, well, why are you here talking to us about a how question? The county board and the committees, your big picture, why? What are our, what's our mission? Why do we exist? And what programs or services do we deliver? Staff are the how people, and I would say you are 100% correct. But for a fact that you have through your rules that if we are going to make a change from a contractual service model to a direct delivery model, any new position, which is a how question, needs to come by ordinance through a process, and it starts with the standing committee. If we're going to add new positions, standing committee would be public safety. It then would have to go to this committee and ultimately be approved by the county board for any new positions. So we wanted to be proactive because our contract with our jail medical would have been up at the end of July. We wanted to make sure we had enough time. If we needed to make a switch, and it was fast, that we had it on the calendars. We complied with Wisconsin's open meeting law and a posting of agendas to have it before the committees. But I don't think we're going to be making that change, but it's been a good exercise in terms of walking that through, and I want to take the opportunity to have Chad kind of give you just a little bit more information on kind of what those issues from a high level looked like, what our process was in terms of evaluating what our next steps look like, and what our plan is moving forward. So with that, Chad, you want to take that?
I want to start by recognizing Corporation Counsel Pierner, who is in the room. He was instrumental in helping us navigate this because this was a highly complex contractual issue that we worked through with the jail, Corporation Counsel, and the vendor that we had providing those services in the jail. We started our contract with the current provider back in December of 2020. And at that time, things seemed to be going good, but over time, I'm certain that they were dealing with many of the challenges we are faced with. We were having issues with staffing, covering shifts. Care largely was done well. However, there were times where we were left without the contractual services that we were paying for. We have a requirement under DOC, the Department of Corrections Code 350, to provide medical care, mental health care, and dental care to any inmate that's in our facility. And we need to make sure that when we contract a service and our inmates need those services, that someone is here to provide them. So we made the decision that we were no longer going to remain in that agreement with that vendor, and we have two options on the table. Jail Administrator Ledoux did a wonderful job of putting together a business plan in the event the county were ever to decide that we were going to go direct services, that we were going to staff that and provide that. At the same time, she also authored an RFP, and we received those RFP submissions last Friday. Very interesting, two very different RFPs, and we are going to start looking at one of those vendors and having conversations with them in the hopes that we can continue a vendor relationship and do it that way. If that can't work, we have a backup plan, to Lance's point. So that's where we stand right now, and we're hopeful that we will have a new vendor as we get into July.
I want to just echo what Chad indicated about, I mean, Sandra did a fantastic job on that business plan. I think they're going through this process, as I alluded to before, was a good exercise. And I still think it behooves us to continue to evaluate, because there are a lot of what I'll call soft costs when you work with any vendor, right? And as Chad referenced, this is very complex. So the care being provided was, again, largely not the issue. But as you can understand, if we have to have, for example, someone is having an issue that we need to address through medical care, stitches, I think was the example that Sandra provided. We may have a vendor that, for whatever reason, is not able to or not willing to deliver that service on site. So if we need to have an individual receive stitches, we would transport that individual to a local medical facility, hospital, or a walk-in to do that. So those are a lot of the costs. When you're not in the direct care position, that is, you're not making the determination of whether a certain care is provided specifically in-house or requires a transport, or even if you, if you're in a position where a care could be provided internally or externally, but the decision isn't yours, all these other costs flow from that. So we want to take the time over the next several months, even if we continue to proceed through the contractual service model, to better understand those soft costs. Because to Chad's point, everyone's struggling with recruiting. It doesn't matter what industry you're in, but at least if you're struggling yourself, you're in 100% control of the steps you take to attempt to recruit those and fill those positions. So for example, you're in a much more, you're in the driver's seat in terms of recruiting and retention. We might think outside the box a lot more proactively to fill our own positions than perhaps a vendor would, because to Chad's point, if they can't fill a shift but they're not feeling all the other ancillary costs, they don't have that heavy incentive to recruit for those positions. And it's also rather awkward for us to recruit for a vendor to fill a seat. So I still think, despite the fact that right now all indications are we're going to continue in our contractual services model with one of the vendors, that we want to continue to understand those ancillary soft costs, because it might behoove us to move. And Sandra did a great job on that business plan.
And you should know that some of those soft costs, we were watching them, and they rose significantly over the last, say, 6 months. And it was becoming a situation where it was not financially feasible anymore to continue down that path.
So if we are not successful in negotiating a new proposal or agreement, then we're going to be scrambling?
I wouldn't call it scrambling. We have a plan. Sandra has a very good plan. We have already begun all the preliminary conversations with the people that we would need. A medical director to oversee the care. We already have agreements ready to go if that needs to take place. And they're verbal agreements right now, but we have agreements to do that. We have had conversations with a physician's assistant who would oversee the care, and nurses who want to work within they want to work for the county. That's a good thing. So we are not afraid if we have to jump into this. It will be a lot of work, don't get me wrong, but we're confident we could do it.
And the only thing I'll add to that is, it would be a heavy lift to do the recruitments and fill the positions. But as I alluded to before, in the absence of individuals in those seats, we do have a strategy. I mean, there's a process in place, which is we transport out of the facility to get a lot of that care completed, which is not ideal. But I want to make very clear that even if we did have to, I know it's not scramble, but if we didn't have a contract in place, we have a strategy in place and a methodology in place to ensure that we are compliant with statute and administrative code, and that inmates within our facility are receiving the care they need.
Okay, so you'll keep us posted.
We will.
Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you.
All right, that will take us to potential updates to the 2018 to 22 strategic plan. All of the standing committees have been asked to review and comment on the strategic plan. As you recall at the last meeting, Vice Chair McEwen talked about the potential for extending the life of the current strategic plan. But in the process of doing that, the question was, what strategies needed to be added to the objectives within the plan, and you received, as part of the agenda, the link to the strategic plan. And should any of the strategies under your objectives be prioritized? And then are there objectives and/or strategies from the 2016 comprehensive plan, should they be added to the strategic plan? And we don't have a lot that fall directly into the purview of this committee, although we are involved in a number of them. And I don't know if you've had a chance to give some thought to that, but given the labor shortage and other things, I think we have to look at how do we make Marathon County an attractive place to work, not only for our employees, but also to entice other residents to the county, so that the manufacturing and other jobs have an adequate labor supply. And then we also are trying to provide cost-effective services, public services. Are there some strategies or other things that you would like to do? And I know in the past, in our discussions, and I don't know if I'm stealing your thunder, but one of the concepts was, do we want to look at our tax deed properties as a potential source for housing? So I'll turn it over to Administrator Leonard for discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And before we elaborate on that specific avenue, I think that's a great segue into, and I apologize, the Vice Chair couldn't be here, Vice Chair McEwen, so I'm the stand-in, and I'm not as effective discussing the strategic plan. But as the chair of this committee referenced, there are three questions trying to get at essentially one large idea, which is, should we simply extend the strategic plan for 2 years? What do we need to bring into that strategic plan, if anything, in recognition of the fact that I think everyone knows that some things have changed since 2018. Things that were perhaps not as large of a priority in 2018 that perhaps now are and need to be incorporated into that 2018 to 2022 strategic plan. So the links are in your packet, and the request from the Vice Chair is really one of, you can have conversation at this meeting and certainly at future meetings, but really there's a request from the Vice Chair of the board to do some homework and really look at that 2016 comprehensive plan. And the Vice Chair has used two examples of things that, in his mind and in some of the other committees that there's been discussion already, that kind of demonstrate that idea that perhaps there's things that should be incorporated into the strategic plan from the comprehensive plan that, among other things, demonstrate really how well the board did in 2015, putting together that 2016 comprehensive plan. And the two examples are things that the Vice Chair has referenced in previous meetings before other standing committees that you've probably seen in the news. The first is, as Chair Robinson referenced the idea of affordable housing, a lack of housing. In your last year's budget book, we talked about the housing market and how properties were selling at such a rapid pace relative to the work within the Treasurer's office, the Register of Deeds office in terms of recording those documents. Also, we've talked about some issues we've had in tax deed properties and how that's impacted some departments. So this idea of the need to increase affordable, available housing is one that has been certainly within the media and been talked about at the county board level. There is an objective within the comprehensive plan that talks about that. That is objective 4.1 of your comprehensive plan that talks about expanding access to affordable housing, and there are a number of strategies listed within the comprehensive plan to do that the board, again, approved in 2016. So the vice chair has used that. Is that an example of something that needs to be brought forward from the 2016 comprehensive plan and incorporated into the 2018 to 2022 strategic plan because it's such a priority? The second is one of childcare, and one of your colleague committees, the Extension, Education, Economic Development, at the end of last term, that committee identified childcare as something to work on as we were closing out the previous term. It was something that led to the incorporation of childcare and the expansion of access to childcare into the administrator's work plan, which the full board approved of earlier this year. And it's something that we've been working on in administration and several other departments, working with other local stakeholders to apply for a grant, which you likely have seen in the news that we did receive. So we received a grant through the Department of Children and Families for $75,000 in strategic planning, technical assistance to address that within our community with a number of other stakeholders. We were the lead grant applicant. So those are two examples of things that the vice chair has brought up as maybe those are things we move forward. They were things that were discussed at other committees. But the homework really is take a look at all of the 64 objectives from that comprehensive plan in 2016 and the more than 200 strategies that were identified in that document. And childcare is in that document as well. That's, I believe it's objective 10.1. It's a strategy, I believe it's strategy A under objective 10.1 of the comprehensive plan, and try to identify, are there certain things that need to be moved forward? My refrain in these ongoing discussions when the vice chair makes his presentation and I have the opportunity to follow is one of really the importance of being selective. Staff time is a very scarce resource. Your strategic plan, and I think it was Supervisor Sherfinsky at a previous committee meeting referenced the breadth of the strategic plan and how it's not really reasonable to expect that staff are able to move all of those objectives forward because there's so many. And I want to echo that. Please be selective in bringing these things forward. But that said, certainly look through all of the objectives. You are not a lead committee with respect to any of the objectives within the strategic plan, but that doesn't preclude you in any way from having the conversation and making recommendations to be considered by the executive committee and then by the full board on what needs to be kind of brought forward to any strategic plan amendment and extension. So with that background, just talking about housing, I'm certainly happy to answer any questions on any of your thoughts and when you have discussion. But I do think there's an opportunity relative to our tax deed properties. As this committee does know, we do have kind of a body of properties that haven't moved through that tax deed process. We're currently getting title research done on 50 of them. My understanding from my last conversation with the treasurer is that they had the first batch of 10 that they've received, and they're continuing to do that work to notify property owners to start that process. But with the recent changes in state law relative to the proceeds from the sale of tax deed properties upon taking by the government, I think there might be an opportunity to look at that differently. I've been doing some evaluation with our various departments and starting with administration You may know this, but we have treatment court operations within Marathon County. We do rent from local landlords to provide housing for individuals as they make their way through that treatment court process. Stable housing is a foundational part of treatment court, drug court, and OWI court. So we do, within our current operations, have a need to contract through leases for housing. Perhaps there's a way to do that differently using tax deed properties to reduce our operational costs in terms of outside rental fees, and also address some of the tax deed backlog. I can also inform you, we just received through our Department of Social Services a grant for $327,000 from the Department of Children and Families to do a pilot project with respect to child protection cases to address housing needs for individuals within our communities that might otherwise, be involved in our child protection and juvenile justice system. So housing is certainly something we're beginning to look into, but again, this whole process from a staff perspective, I think it's a great way for the board to really delve into their role as visionaries, which is the term, again, that Wisconsin Counties Association used, Sarah Dietrich Kasdorf used in her communication to you. We need to hear from you what our priority needs to be. Right now in your strategic plan, speaking to question 2 that's listed, there are strategies A through F, for example, in some of these objectives, but those haven't been prioritized. That's simply a convention from the comprehensive plan. Staff haven't interpreted that as, hey, we should do A first, B second. But if you, as the policymakers, do think, hey, you know what, strategy D of this objective is the most important thing to work on, please provide that direction. And then I can, through my annual work plan and my discussions with department heads, try to affect that. The other thing I will indicate is that there was a request at some of the other standing committees for an update relative to the outcome measures that are listed within the strategic plan and the 2020 strategic plan update. I have, based on that request, reached out to all of the lead departments to ask them to look at all of their objectives for which they are the lead, look at that objective, evaluate each strategy, and give a short informational update to me on efforts that have been done to move forward each strategy. At the same time, I've asked them to get the most up-to-date information they have with respect to each outcome measure listed within the strategic plan. And then lastly, I've asked them to take a look at the 2020 annual update document, and if there are significant changes in any of those core programs that were identified in that informational update, that they provide that information to me as well, so I can provide that to each of the standing committees and particularly those lead committees. My hope is that I'll have that information. I've requested it by the end of this month. I don't know if that's a reasonable ask. That's a fair amount of work from each department. But my hope is that I can provide an informational update either in July or at the latest in August in terms of the updates that and the progress that we've made. So I hope that addresses some of your concerns, Chair Robinson.
Have you had a chance to give this any thought, looking at either the strategic plan or the comprehensive plan? Chair Gibbs?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think one of the things that we've heard, and we hear, not only here in Marathon County, I hear at the state level, and I also hear at the national level, is the need and how devastating the pandemic has been on childcare and the childcare industry. And that leads to another issue, which leads to availability of workforce and the ability of workforce to actually work. So I think that is one area that really does need to be moved to the strat plan. And then where I think there's an opportunity for this committee to weigh in on that is we have significant amount of facilities that are potentially going to be coming available for use. And is there, and do any of those facilities There's two things that the county can do. I mean, obviously, they can dispose of those facilities and have dollars available. Or there's the opportunity potentially of providing those facilities for an entity to be able to run a child care operation out of those at a reduced cost to be able to assist the entity in providing child care throughout the county. So I think that that's one thing that we should bring forward into the strat plan is how do we look at the disposition of the future potential available properties. We have some significant ones that are coming available. Obviously, one social services facility is going to be coming available at some point when we move social services. We have already some vacant property down on River Drive. It does need some attention, but it may be utilized in other development, so that may not be available. But we also have a floor on the library, the potential, but there's also costs. So I think, looking at some of the facilities that we have and whether or not those might be a strategy to utilize in potentially subsidizing childcare in this county to make available additional workforce. And even if that's workforce for Marathon County itself.
Are there any other thoughts? Supervisor Lemmer.
When looking at the comprehensive plan, a lot of the data in there is from 2010. Is there a way to get some more current numbers that would take into account, for instance, the impact COVID has had?
There are some reports that are out there. The Marathon County Pulse tracks some data. There would be the census data. I'm not sure that that would capture a true post-COVID environment, and the life report. But again, I think that's pre-COVID. But many of the numbers would be more current than the 2010 data. So there are some sources, but I think much of that information was collected even and assembled before COVID. I know the Department of Administration and Revenue tracked data on the state level, but again, there's always a lag time.
If I may, Mr. Chair. That's, at least as it relates to the strategic plan, my hope is that I can provide you some information relative to the outcome measures that the board has approved through that planning process, where we are with the most up-to-date information we have, but there certainly is going to be a lag time. For example, Objective 3.3, outcome measure number 1, I know refers to graduation rate. We'll try to get something from 2022, but I doubt we're going to get that. I think we're most likely at best going to get 2021 from surrounding school districts. And I think your overarching point is well taken, that regardless of the data set, even if we do get up-to-date data, there is going to be a significant COVID impact on that. So that's going to be a challenge, as certainly your work is going to be difficult identifying what, if anything, needs to be moved into the strategic plan. But if you do have any thoughts on specific data that you're looking for, feel free to reach out to me. I can try to point you in the right direction if I know where that might be housed. The challenge with data that, it's been my experience, one of the challenges with data is that it takes significant staff time and energy to track, compile, and analyze that data. And that has been one area where just historically that we haven't invested a great deal of staff time in certainly that analysis piece. We do collect a lot of information, but that analysis piece, I think, is an opportunity for us. But if you do have a specific piece you're looking for, please just reach out.
Supervisor Hart.
Yeah, I just had a broader question about our committee's role in contributing to the strategic plan, as we don't really have any jurisdiction over any particular piece, but also kind of jurisdiction over all of it. So Is it more helpful to come up with objectives and then strategies, or have objectives come to us and then think, well, what strategies are under our jurisdiction that can address those objectives? It's more of just a question.
I think we'll be doing both. You know, I think that the purpose is, I think the challenge is, are the objectives still relevant and are the strategies appropriate? And I think, you know, we looked at, you know, one is having safer highways and reducing the accident rate by 5%. That's hard to measure in the infrastructure committee, but rather is it implementing our safety plan or doing something else? So I think it's a little bit of both. And so that what we ask is that you look at the comp plan, and there are some things in the comp plan relative to promoting adequate housing. I think in light of the discussion on the tax deed, we could take a look at from the county, and we've heard that as a critical need for bringing new people into the community. And there's also a provision in there relative to energy efficiency and use of renewable resources. You know, as we go about looking at new building designs, if we go with a new shared facility for highway parks and others, do we want to look at how to make that as energy efficient as possible? Those are other, you know, things potentially that we could look at. But we'd ask that you look at those recommendations in the comp plan to see if there's anything that's relevant to the short-term strategic plan for the county. Now, I think this is going to be an ongoing process. We wanted to plant the seed with all the committees. I know the executive committee will be kind of reviewing what all the committees said tomorrow. But, you know, it's a process. And I think that one of the concerns is that it would be very difficult for us to revisit this, to rewrite the strategic plan right now. And the thought is we should carry it over, but carry it over probably with some tweaks. I think there would be a desire to have the county board itself, with the 17 new members, get more familiar with the operations, and then you know, look at a new strategic plan going forward. But I think there's a learning curve. Is what's the baseline, and how do you move beyond the baseline? But you know, all thoughts are welcome at this time, and ultimately it's the county board that will set those priorities. Are there any thoughts? Perhaps we'll wait for that report from the department heads. And again, this is an iterative process.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The only thing I'll add is I think the vice chair has kind of envisioned just that it will be iterative. He has reached out, as I understand it, or will be reaching out to all of the vice chairs from the committees to talk about, you know, really increasing the vice chair role with respect to the committee's work on the strategic plan. And at least in a prior conversation with Vice Chair McEwen, he referenced having maybe at your next meeting, if everyone has the opportunity to look through all of those objectives in the comp plan, and there are 64 of them, and then the 200 plus strategies. You know, there's nothing precluding you. A perfect example is what Chair Gibbs brought up as it relates to childcare. Right now, that objective is listed under 10.1. It's objective 10.1 in your comprehensive plan. Strategy A relates to childcare. So it is in that economic development arena. And it certainly does relate to economic development. And one of your objectives within your strategic plan is increasing the availability of skilled workforce. And childcare, that strategy could easily be dragged up into that existing objective within the strategic plan. But I think it also, and the vice chair made this point at a previous standing committee meeting, it also certainly could, there's an argument to be made that that same strategy could be listed under objective 3.3, which relates to ensuring that every child makes it to adulthood with health, stability, and growth opportunities, because not only is childcare an economic development issue, but it's also helpful to look at childcare providers as early childhood educators. That, you know, when we need to recognize that childcare is more than, or certainly can be more than simply daycare. Like, or watching children, babysitting, I should say. Childcare can be more than babysitting. It's an opportunity for early childhood education. So there's nothing that stops a strategy from living in two objectives.
Anything else today? All right, if not, we will, I'm sure, be talking about this in future meetings. Next, does anybody have anything that they'd like to have come up at the next meeting, or in future meetings? The next meeting, we will be spending some time on ARPA. I'd also like to revisit if time permits, our work plan for the committee. And then we'll need to begin that process of making recommendations relative to the ARPA request to the county board. I don't know that we'll get through that next time. Maybe if we could just kind of lay out the process that we might use for ranking them, and then at our first meeting in July, finalize that, the process. But our next meeting is scheduled for the 21st. Are there some other items that you would like to see the committee take up at this time? Chair, and I know the opioid.
Oh, okay, the opioid and the potential of, securitization of that fund.
Do you want that at the 21st meeting? Or
Well, there's going to be another meeting. I was at the WCA a board meeting last Friday, and there's going to be additional 3 meetings coming up where they're going to have specific numbers for each of the counties based on some assumptions. In order to securitize the bond, effectively, we're going out and bonding for that. And the bonding that is paid for with the payments. And so the county is not at risk for any, if the funding does not come through, but there's an assumption based on rate and the willingness to buy up the risk, if you will. And so there's going to be meetings that are going to entail some specifics based on those assumptions that the interest rate is going to be this, and the willingness to buy those bonds are going to be such. And then they'll have some specific numbers that the county can look at as far as what that would potentially mean in dollars and cents in comparison to the full amount over the potential 18 years. So it's not on the agenda, so I won't go into any further detail.
It's in Mike smiling when you said that. But I think that we may need a dedicated meeting to that topic, and we may want to invite others to attend that meeting because of the complexity. So at some point in the time, because I sat through the session that they had last week, and very informative and very complex. So we will need to bring that forward. Anything else? If not, a motion to adjourn is in order.
So move.
Moved by Gibbs, seconded by Lemmer. All those in favor of adjourning will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries. We are adjourned.